Well, I was thinking of like emailing all of you this week and making sure that you were wearing your running shoes or your walking shoes this morning when you came, because that's the title of my message this morning, Early Morning Walk. How many of you do walking for exercise? Okay, a lot of us do. I was told by my doctor now that I've had two knee surgeries, you ain't running anymore. So I was very happy because walking is kind of fun. So works out that way. But walking is the most popular form of exercise, if you did not know that. And an early morning walk is considered by most fitness experts the best time to take that walk. So I decided to do a little research on the internet. No, I did not use AI yet. I did still on my own. I did a Google search. And in a 2019 Healthline article, it was entitled, "The Benefits of Starting Your Day with a Walk." A certified personal trainer by the name of Daniel Bubis gave 10 benefits to this. And I want us to pay attention to them by what's not included. So that's what I want you to do. The first one was boost your energy. Second, improve your mood. How many of you have ever gotten in a fight and went for a walk afterwards? It improves your mood, right? Yeah, exactly, no matter when that happens. Number 3, complete your physical activity for the day. If you're the type that loves to have check boxes or task lists and you've said exercise, now you're done, you've got it out of the way. I love how this is phrased, the fourth one, it may help you lose weight. May. Depending on the breakfast you have after the morning walk, probably is what he's meaning there. Number 5, prevent or manage health conditions. 6, strengthen muscles. 7, improve your mental clarity. 8, you'll sleep better at night. 9, you'll beat the heat right now, especially. And then 10th, you're going to make healthier choices throughout the day. So 10 great reasons to go walking. But did you notice that nowhere in that article did they mention any spiritual benefits? No spiritual benefits to going out on that walk. It didn't say you have a time for prayer, everything. Don't worry, I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But there's nothing wrong with physical benefits. Trust me. You know, our health plans all want you to be healthy. In fact, they are vitally important if you want to live a long and productive life. But today we're going to read about an entirely different early morning walk. And this walk would provide the disciples with a chance to see Jesus differently. Imagine this. You've been with Jesus all this time. You thought you'd seen everything until this story. And it all started as Jesus wanted and needed to be alone with God to refresh and renew. So that's our first thing we want to look at, of getting alone with God. That's the start of this whole story. Jesus had just been part of one of the greatest miracles of all time. The feeding of the 5,000. Think about that. But the cost of that miracle was starting to weigh on him. He already wanted to get away before the miracle started because he wanted to grieve the loss of his cousin John. He goes through this whole thing. I mean, imagine, think of a family reunion that all the family actually shows up. For some of us, that could be a very large group of people, and you didn't plan for that many. So mentally, you weren't ready. Physically, you weren't ready. So Jesus is tired. But now Jesus takes control of the situation himself. Let's look at this first verse again in verse 22. Again, if you don't have your Bibles with you, just make sure you follow along, but write down what you need. So in verse 22, it says, immediately after they were done eating. It was an American restaurant, you could tell. Not a European restaurant, because they let you sit there forever. And so immediately after the people are done eating, Jesus wants to get them out the door. So he makes the disciples get in the boat and says, hey guys, get on ahead of me. Get in the boat, get on ahead of me. And to the other side, while he dismisses the crowd. Think about this. You don't know what Jesus said, but he was able to get the crowd to go home. So far, he hadn't been able to do this. The crowds would not leave him alone. But this instance, he was able to get the crowds to go. He was able to say something. This was needed, not just for the crowd. They needed to get away as well, but for Jesus himself. And since he'd sent the disciples ahead, he was now truly alone. How many of you enjoy those moments when you can be truly alone? You know, I'm an introvert on a bungee cord. That's what I've always said. That's what most pastors are. If you proudly as a pastor say you're an extrovert, I begin to wonder, because it's just, you can only go so far, and then boom, you got to get back into your study or something like that. And so, but he's truly alone, and he desperately needed to do this for him, because we see it in verse 23. Read along here. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. If you haven't noticed, prayer's really been a focus these last few weeks in the church. It always is, but we really brought it to the forefront over these last few weeks. It started on July 30th when we had the Harvest Prayer Service. And for those of you who were here, you could tell it was different. Remember, I told everyone, oh, maybe an hour, hour and a half. 2 hours later, you guys finally are going home. The Holy Spirit was present. We were learning things about this campus, about how God is moving and how God has moved in the past and what it's going to be looking like for the future. We were praying over every single space. I think the only thing we didn't pray over were the restrooms. So that was about it. So we were here. We were doing everything that we could. And it's good for believers to get together and do that as a body. But we read here about the power of getting alone. Not only is corporate prayer important, but getting alone with God privately is also important. Jesus had to recharge his spiritual and physical batteries. So if Jesus needed to do that, who are we to say that we don't? Think about that for a minute. If he had to do that, if the Son of God had to recharge his physical and spiritual batteries, so should we. And it is important because sometimes we just need to be with God. We don't need to be with anything else. To be effective, this needs to be an extended time. And to help you feel more comfortable doing this, out on the welcome table in the narthex, I have an amazing sheet. It's called Spending Extended Time in Prayer. It's from my favorite organization when it comes to one-on-one discipleship and prayer. It's the Navigators. I love them. They've been doing it well since about 1938, so they're tried and true. But it's the foundation of this whole premise is that there is a method to this. If we don't have a method, it won't happen. So learning how to schedule your time is on here. What do you need when you go on there? Like, here's an example. Prayer letters from missionaries or other Christian workers, a favorite devotional book, a current prayer list, your own quiet time journal. That's important. We all forget things, and we even forget prayer things. And if we have a journal where we can write down what we have lifted up to God, and then when God has answered it, that is so very important. The third thing, how to stay awake and alert. How many of you fall asleep in prayer during the day? Trust me, it happens. It happens. You're so into it, you become so relaxed, and then you look down at your watch and go, oh, where did the time go? You were praying in the Spirit, is what charismatics would tell us. But the idea is you're kind of falling asleep and alert, so there, and then taking notes. It is so very important. But if you want a copy, we've got them there. If we need to make more, we will. God created paper for a reason. And so definitely this is something you could fold up, put in your Bible, put in your prayer journal you'll be able to have. But spending that extended time in prayer. This is what Jesus was doing. We don't know exactly what he was doing, so this is our idea of how it should be done. But as he was doing this, even Jesus was being prepared for what was coming next. And what was coming next was understanding the purpose of having courage in the dark. That's our next section as we look at. All of us have used night lights in our life. Don't tell me you don't have one right now. It started when we were kids because we were afraid of the boogeyman or whatever was underneath the bed. You know, it started with that cute little, what was the big, Precious Memories, you know, like little night light or something like that, or you had a little angel night light for your child or there. And now as we're older, we have to have a night light because if we get up in the middle of the night, we want to be able to see and not like stub our toe or fall or something like that. So even as adults, we all have night lights. And so why do we have those? Because bad things happen in the dark. Plain and simple. Bad things can happen to us when it's dark out. They're designed for a sense of security when our senses are not operating fully. You get up in the middle of the night, you are not thinking. And it's very easy to have something happen. This is what we are witness to next in this passage. While Jesus is now all rested and refreshed, he's had his quiet time, and he's like, oh man, I feel great. This is awesome. I've been with my dad. Life is good. I guess I'll go back to work. And he looks down from the mountain, and he sees the disciples. And they are totally wore out. Why? Well, the fishermen of the disciples, that's Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the four of them, they were very used to being on the water at night. In fact, on the Sea of Galilee, nighttime fishing is the majority because it gets so hot through the daytime. And so the fish go down too deep. Nighttime they come back up, and you can fish so much easier. So they were used to being on the water at night. But being at sea at night can also be dangerous. And this is what we find out. When the temperatures change over the Sea of Galilee and the winds are coming over the Golan Heights off of the desert, the heat hits and the storms brew. If you've ever been to Israel and see that, it's very, very graphic to understand. Even a windy day, just like a typical windy day, those waves can be pretty big. And so a storm comes up as soon as Jesus sends them away, and they were in trouble. And we see that in verse 24. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. This was a strong storm. They'd been battling it all night. And what we find out is that the average fishing boat at the time was about 27 feet long and 7.5 feet wide. How can we be so certain? Because archaeologists back in 1986 found a first century fishing boat off of the Sea of Galilee. Probably with what's like going on in Europe right now, they're finding all these things, that the drought's going on and everything, and they're finding all this stuff. Well, that's what they found. Now, it's not the Jesus boat. I know there were some archaeologists at the time that were trying to say it was the Jesus boat, but it was there. It's not too small. It's definitely not large. Roy, Sue, you guys are big boaters. 27-footer, not very big, right? Not very big. Even out here on the Delta or on the bay, you would have problems with it, right? So here it is. The winds and the waves are against them, so we can assume they're moving from the east side of the Sea of Galilee over to the west. So that is kind of the situation that's there. And then Jesus comes toward them and entirely changes everything. This is the passage that we always get focused on, verses 25 through 27. It says, shortly before dawn, morning people out there? Anybody? Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. Already, this is going to be an interesting story, right? He is walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. So early in the morning meant about 3 to 6 a.m. When I first moved out here in 2013, I was told that there was 3 different commuter times that left Discovery Bay. There was a big group that left at 4:30 in the morning. There was another group that left at 5:30. And then the last ones that were lucky to start at 9 o'clock and knew how to read Vasco Road, they would leave at 7. That was kind of the standard thing. So early morning, 3 to 6, commute time. And they've been rowing against this storm. Remember, they didn't have motors. It was human power here. They were rowing against these storm-powered winds for many hours, And now they are physically and emotionally wore out. See, this is exactly where the enemy wants you and me to be at. The enemy wants to have us totally wore out. There are so many things going on in the church as a whole right now in the United States that it's wearing Christians out. And the enemy's loving it. The enemy is loving it. He's got this group against that group. He's got this group that's big on TV, this group that isn't big on TV anymore. Everything, and the enemy's just sitting there going, exactly what I want. And what they're forgetting is where their focus is. Their eye isn't on the ball. Their eye isn't where it needs to be. And the enemy is very, very happy. Because the enemy doesn't want you to rely upon your faith. He wants you to focus on the fear. And I'm going to say that again. When you are emotionally and physically wore out, that is when the enemy attacks. He attacks there, and he tempts you to not rely upon your faith, but to focus on the fear. That's what's happening. That's what's happening in this country right now. This is not the country that I started as a pastor in 30 years ago. We've digressed. Oh, technology, great. We're going super. Economy, yeah, it's amazing. You're making more money now than you ever have. But when I started ministry 30 years ago, you had the majority of the country said that they were practicing Christians. It was close to 65-70%. Look at those statistics now. Barna is one of the best places to go. It's less than 40% now. And depending on the age demographic, it's even worse. The group that's the most active, you won't want to hear this, but it's the Gen Zs. They're the most active in their faith right now. Boomers, you've really fallen off. I commend you guys for being here. You're abnormal. You probably already knew that. But anyhow, it's the idea of where are you putting your faith or fear? Fear keeps you from coming to church. Faith drives you to church. And every single time that we're away from church, the enemy gets a chance to do a hold here. And what Jesus reminds them is you guys have to take courage. Take courage. So what is courage? Courage is that quality or mind or spirit that enables you to face difficulty, danger, and pain without fear. It's also known as bravery. Jesus is telling them to take hold of courage. That means grab a hold of it. Don't let it go. And who is the courage? It's Jesus. Keeping our eye on the ball. That's what we're supposed to do. That's how we're able to get through this. And Jesus is telling them that he has divine authority. He's showing them right there. I'm walking on water. Who does that? Then he'll just calm the waves like that. Who can do that? Nobody can. Have courage through me is what they're saying. So if they want it, they have to take it. You guys are here today in worship. That means you want something. You need something. That's why you're here. It's not because I'm good looking. It's because Jesus has what you need, and you wanted it, and you came to receive it. And Jesus is telling you and me the same thing right now, that if we want this courage, we have to take it. And when things are at their darkest, we have to have courage in the dark, and that only comes through Jesus Christ. That is really the key that we have here. We take hold of it. We don't let go. But when we do that, there are still going to be some that doubt. You're still going to have some doubters in your life. So why do we doubt? This is moving into the most famous part of the passage, because this is when Peter gets involved. You know, the perpetual foot and mouth disciple. That's what I always call him. He's always getting himself in trouble. Well, here, Peter is the only one of the disciples that extends himself, extends his faith, has the courage that none of the rest of them have, and he walks on water. They had just thought it was a ghost, and fear sets in. They are exactly where the enemy wants them, and Jesus knows it, so he asked Peter a really, really good question to come out and join him on the water. Not for a swim, but to walk on the water. Peter, not wanting to disappoint Jesus, gets out of the boat. Can't imagine that, right? He's sitting down. Okay, Jesus, I'll come to you. Trying to get the leg over the edge of the boat, and puts his foot down on the water, and it's like, my foot should be going all the way through. Why is it not? All in the meantime, he's still looking at Jesus. Kind of like with the first time with a swimming lesson. If it was your parent that was getting you to jump off the edge of the pool, or if maybe it was a swim instructor, as long as you kept your eyes on there, it wasn't so scary. So Peter's doing that. Okay, Jesus, I'll keep looking at you. Okay, and Jesus is sitting here going, look at me, Peter. Peter, right here. Don't look over there. Look over at me. So he gets his foot out, stands. Okay, I can stand on one. Brings the other leg. Oh, wait a minute. This is as solid as the boat was. And he's probably like, his legs are probably going like this. But then he goes, oh, Jesus is walking away from me. He's wanting me to walk toward him. Remember when our little ones learned how to walk? It was the same thing. You let them come to you because it was cute at first. Then you extended that because the video didn't work the first time. And so you needed to make sure that you got them walking. And Jesus keeps doing this, and Peter keeps going. And what's great about it is the scriptures do not tell us how long Peter was walking on the water. We have no clue. But it was long enough to prove to Peter that as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he could do the impossible. That is so profound. So if you're ever doing a survey or question thing or have a trivia night, how many people walked on water? The answer is always 2. Never 1. 2 people walked on water. But 1 walked on it the longest. So Peter does what everyone else does in this circumstance. He's out in the water, he's looking at Jesus, and his peripheral vision takes over. Slap, slap, the waves are coming up and everything over him. He's probably soaking wet, and he starts to sink. All because he took his eyes off of Jesus. And we see in verse 30, after he's going down, in verse 30, but the wind, when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. The fear took over. He cries out in fear. He cries out to Jesus for safety. And Jesus responds the way that we knew he would in verse 31 when he says, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Now I'll go King Jamesian on you. O thee of little faith. O you of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? Now doubt is to be uncertain about things. But I love this last definition. It's called hesitate to believe. That's what doubt is. We hesitate to believe. Peter hesitates and breaks his gaze at Jesus. He looks toward the waves, away from Jesus, and it gets you in trouble every time when we do that. But Jesus, in his love and grace, reaches out his hand and snatches Peter from destruction. You see, doubt is that moment of hesitation that can cost you the winning shot. Anyone ever done that? You've been in sports, and that little split second, it keeps you from asking out that boy or that girl, and of course your life has changed forever because you hesitated to ask that profoundly scary question for all guys. Will you go out with me? You hesitate, but your competitor doesn't. Think about that. Faith never wavers, but doubt always does. And Jesus is right by asking Peter, why did you doubt? Peter had just seen 5,000 men and their family was miraculously fed. He still does this. And when the going got tough, Peter folded. But we can't be mad at him. Why? Because we would do the same. We would do the same. So from this early morning walk, as I close, we see that in the end, the disciples have their eyes open to who Jesus really is. And as soon as Jesus and Peter get into the boat, the winds cease and the praise begins. Not just Peter, but all the disciples worship God and Jesus for who he is. If you need a reminder of Jesus' holiness, start walking. That's my encouragement for this morning. Get alone with God. Really alone. Turn off your phone, get outside, and glory in God's beautiful creation. Let any fear that may be in you be erased by the courage that only comes from Jesus alone. Amen.